Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. Not long ago, I was officiating at a funeral, and the person who had died had picked the scriptures and hymns for his funeral. There was one other instruction he left for us. The scriptures to be read at the service were to be read from the King James Bible. That was how he heard those scriptures when he grew up, and that was how he wanted them proclaimed at his funeral. So that's what we did. As we continue this week learning about the story of the Bible, today we begin to focus on the early English Bible, and it's quite the story. If there's one thing the King James Version is known for, it's the beautiful language it uses. Things just seem to flow in gorgeous, elegant language. There's a good reason for that. When King James commissioned the creation of this Bible, one of the specific mandates he gave was to make it sound good. More on that tomorrow. If we are looking at the story of the English Bible, however, we've got to start at the beginning. One of the very early translations of the Bible was called the Vulgate, but the Vulgate had taken texts in Greek and Hebrew and translated those into Latin. For centuries, the church had understood the Vulgate as the standard Bible to be used. So early attempts to translate the Bible into the common language were often based on the Vulgate. The problem is that when you do that, you're basing your translation on a translation. You are 2 steps removed from the original. I'll also remind you of what we learned yesterday, that translating the Bible into the common language of the people was controversial. In that day, they thought that the scriptures should be reserved for the clergy only. The Protestant Reformation turned all this on its ear, and what started with Martin Luther in Germany soon spread to England. For the English Bible, we need to start with John Wycliffe in the 1300s. He was a professor and scholar based at Oxford, and late in his life he became critical of the established church, so they removed him from his post. He then began to lead a group that worked to create an English Bible. However, Wycliffe and his followers began to attack the teachings and practices of the church as well, and so they were declared heretics. Wycliffe Bibles were burned, along with some of Wycliffe's followers themselves. There are only about 200 copies of the Wycliffe Bible surviving. Wycliffe translated his Bible just like everyone else, basing it on the Vulgate. However, in 1516, Erasmus published the Greek New Testament, and now the original text was available. William Tyndale is considered the father of the English Bible, and he had grown frustrated at the ignorance of the clergy. He asked his bishop for permission to translate the Bible and was flatly denied there in England. So he went to Germany and set to work on the New Testament. He published 6,000 copies, but only 2 survive to this day. The bishop who had denied him permission bought up every copy he could find so that he could burn them. Ironically, Tyndale had run up some debts, and in buying all the copies, this bishop provided money for Tyndale to pay his debts and financed a new corrected version. Tyndale worked directly from the Greek and Hebrew texts, and about 90% of his words were included in the King James Version, and about 75% are in the Revised Standard Version that was used in the 1900s. Tyndale's version was controversial because it didn't come from the Vulgate, but even worse, it was considered highly Protestant. He often advocated for Lutheran practices and quoted Luther's translation a lot. He was the scholar I told you about earlier who was burned at the stake for all this, but because they respected him, they mercifully strangled him first. The next person in the story of the early English Bible was Miles Coverdale. Coverdale revised Tyndale's work and brought some new translations as well. His work became accepted because it contained no Protestant notes or articles, and his was the first complete Bible in English. Two other versions of the early English Bible should be mentioned as well in this lineage. One was called the Matthew Bible, and another the Great Bible. Over time, the English Bible became more and more accepted, and by 1528, King Henry VIII required every parish in the kingdom to have at least one English Bible. Tomorrow, we will finish the story of the English Bible up until our times. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.